Ellie and Ryan's life had always been ordinary, perhaps even a little tight. Ryan was deeply absorbed in his artistic dreams, spending every day hunched over his canvas, sometimes staying awake all night just to finish a piece he believed was a breakthrough. Ellie recognized his talent, but she also knew that art alone couldn't cover their rent and bills each month. So she often took odd jobs, doing temporary office copywriting or tutoring friends' children on weekends, barely keeping their household afloat. That morning, Ellie sat in their tiny kitchen drinking coffee, phone in hand, mentally going over her schedule for the day. Suddenly, an email popped up from a name she had never seen before. She opened it, and her heart instantly leapt into her throat. She had inherited a huge fortune. The source was a distant relative she hadn't been in contact with for years, specifically a cousin of her mother who had lost touch long ago and had no children, leaving all of their assets to her. The amount was enough to completely change her and Ryan's life, even allowing Ryan to focus solely on his art without worrying about making ends meet. Ellie's hand trembled as she held her phone, and countless images flashed through her mind. A new apartment, trips, Ryan no longer staying up late for the next odd job, sunlight flooding his studio. Her excitement was overwhelming. Her lips curved into an involuntary smile, and even her breathing felt lighter. She imagined the moment she would tell Ryan, how he would first be surprised, then hug her, and finally laugh together as they planned their future. This news was like a beam of light at the end of a dark tunnel. Grabbing her bag, Ellie left the apartment, her mind endlessly rehearsing how she would tell Ryan. They had planned to meet that afternoon at the hospital. Ryan was recently involved in a charitable art project, occasionally going to hospitals to paint murals or teach art classes for children. Ellie had originally intended just to visit him and bring some food, but now she decided to go early and deliver the good news first. She got into the car, started the engine, and her heart was brimming with anticipation. On the road, Ellie drove almost absent-mindedly. Her mind was filled with Ryan's astonished expression and the beautiful life they could have. Unconsciously, she sped up, wanting to reach the hospital sooner and share the news. The sun shone brightly on the streets, and traffic was light. She felt completely in control, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Just as Ellie approached an intersection, a car ran a red light and barreled out of nowhere. She swerved violently and slammed on the brakes, but her tires skidded on the slick road, and the car lost control, crashing into the guardrail. The impact was deafening. Glass shattered everywhere. Ellie's head struck the steering wheel hard, sending a wave of dizziness through her. The airbag deployed, wrapping her tightly, but the violent impact made it nearly impossible to breathe. The world outside twisted, and all she could feel was pain and panic flooding her senses. Soon, Ellie heard distant screeching brakes and shouting. Pedestrians gathered, some calling for emergency help. She tried to move, but her body ached intensely, especially her chest and legs. In her mind, she was still thinking about Ryan. She hadn't had the chance to tell him, hadn't seen his smile. It felt as though fate had snatched everything away in an instant. The sound of sirens grew closer. Ellie heard someone call her name, but exhaustion overwhelmed her, and her consciousness began to blur. Her mind replayed the email and her dreams. The new life, Ryan's smile, all the possible days ahead. She fought to tell herself everything would be okay, but the pain and dizziness felt like a heavy weight pulling her slowly into an abyss. The accident had been purely accidental. Ellie had done nothing wrong. She was simply pushed by fate into the unknown at the most unexpected moment. The red light at the intersection, the other car's loss of control, the slippery road after the rain, all compounded to deliver this unforeseen result. No one had foreseen it, and no one could have predicted that this would happen at the moment she was happiest and most hopeful. As Ellie was lifted into the ambulance, she still clutched her phone, the screen still showing that inheritance email. She had been full of joy, wanting to surprise Ryan, and now that surprise was interrupted by a sudden crash. Paramedics worked quickly around her. The beeping monitors and the ambulance's bumps threw her heartbeat and breathing into chaos. In her mind, she remembered the words she wanted to say, "Ryan, we have..." But the words never left her lips, drowned by pain and confusion. During the ride, Ellie's consciousness flickered between clarity and haze, her mind repeatedly returning to the excitement of receiving the email that morning. Her fingers still gripped the phone, as if it were the only link to the future. The flashing lights and the blaring ventilator in the ambulance couldn't stop her imagining Ryan smiling at her, telling her everything was fine, and the two of them planning their future together. Yet, fate was unpredictable. At the very moment Ellie was brimming with hope and excitement, the crash struck like a hammer, instantly derailing the trajectory of her life. She realized this was beyond her control. No matter how she planned or hoped, life had a way of delivering the harshest reminders. Everything could change in an instant. Ellie closed her eyes, feeling the pain in her body, yet unable to let go of the message she was about to tell Ryan. The massive inheritance, the potential happiness, the future she had dreamed of. When Ellie woke up in the hospital, the first thing she saw was the blindingly white ceiling. Pain coursed through her limbs and body, leaving her almost unable to move. She realized she had survived a serious car accident. But what unsettled her most was that Ryan wasn't by her side. Several days passed before Ryan finally rushed in, his expression distant, his eyes showing no concern. "You're awake." Ryan stood at the bedside, his voice flat as if he were speaking about a stranger. Ellie struggled to sit up, her voice hoarse. "Where were you?" Ryan shrugged, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "I thought you were gone." Ellie froze, a chill spreading through her chest. "Gone? What do you mean?" "To be honest," Ryan went on, "I don't have the time or the money to care for a failure." He paused, watching her reaction. "I've already done my best. You know, surgery, care. Resources are limited." Ellie stared at him, struggling for breath. She knew Ryan was lying. He had already learned about the inheritance, and he knew she legally owned all the assets. But he had chosen to hide it, showing only cold indifference at her most vulnerable moment. Her fingers clenched the bedsheet as a wave of betrayal rose inside her. A few days later, as Ellie slowly regained some mobility and began to handle recovery matters, she was struck by shocking news. Ryan had already married a young woman named Sarah, and publicly claimed that Ellie was dead. The words hit her like a bucket of cold water, leaving her nearly unable to believe them. "What? What did you say?" Ellie gripped the bed rail, her voice trembling. The nurses and doctors tried to calm her, but the truth was cruel. Not only had Ryan failed to stay by her side, he had taken advantage of her absence to marry Sarah quickly, erasing Ellie's existence altogether. On her hospital bed, Ellie's thoughts shattered like broken glass. She tried to make sense of it, but found no logic at all. How had Ryan tied her to Sarah? Why was Sarah even part of this? Nothing made sense. Days later, Ellie was discharged and tried to readjust to life. She wanted to quietly manage her daily routine during recovery, but fate once again forced her into the unexpected. By chance, she saw Sarah in a public place. Sarah was chatting with a few people when her eyes suddenly locked on Ellie. Her face turned pale instantly. Her mouth opened in a scream. She's my mother." Ellie froze, her heart pounding with confusion and shock. How could this young woman call her mother? She stared at Sarah, her mind replaying Ryan's actions and his claims to the outside world. She could not comprehend it. How had Ryan connected her to this woman? How did Sarah even know about her? The people around them all turned to look. As Ellie's eyes met Sarah's, she felt an overwhelming sense of unreality. Her body was still recovering, but her heartbeat quickened with shock. She tried to steady her breathing, to keep calm, but the scene before her nearly shattered her thoughts. Ryan stood not far away, his face complicated, his eyes flashing with embarrassment and unease, though he forced a veneer of calm. He clearly hadn't expected Ellie to show up here, nor Sarah to recognize her so quickly. Suspicion and alarm surged in Ellie's chest. What exactly had Ryan been scheming behind the scenes? How did the inheritance, this woman, and her being declared dead all connect? Ellie tried to speak, but Sarah had already grabbed her hand, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, you're really alive." Sarah's voice was filled with fear and joy, sending Ellie's emotions into turmoil. She looked at Sarah's young but oddly familiar face, her mind filled with both shock and confusion, unable to respond immediately. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Ellie felt a crushing pressure she had never experienced before. She realized she had to uncover the truth about this relationship, figure out Ryan's intentions, and understand why Sarah had appeared and why she herself had been erased from her own life. The coldness in the hospital, the betrayal, the inheritance, and this sudden confrontation left her in total shock and disarray. Her mind kept flashing back to the moment of the car crash, her hopes for the future, and Ryan's indifference and lies. Now everything seemed rearranged into a strange and incomprehensible puzzle. Looking at Sarah, Ellie silently told herself she had to uncover the truth, and she had to protect herself and her daughter, even if the whole world was hiding it from her. In that moment, Ellie understood that the days ahead would involve more than just physical recovery. She was about to face an even more complex battle of relationships and family ties. Ryan's coldness, Sarah's terror, and the fact that she had suddenly reappeared in the world all told her one thing. Her life had completely changed, and the answers lay hidden in an uncertain future. After Ellie was discharged, her body gradually recovered, but the questions in her heart only grew heavier. She couldn't understand why Ryan had suddenly become cold, why he had married Sarah, and why he had declared her dead. She decided to find out the truth, no matter the cost. She began combing through old diaries and letters, searching for clues that had once been overlooked. The diary recorded the bits and pieces of her life with Ryan and events from her youth. Ellie remembered a relationship she had in her teens. After it ended, she had given birth to a daughter, but, being too young and unable to care for the child, had ultimately entrusted her to someone else. She had never spoken of it publicly, only quietly kept some letters and photographs. Ellie sorted those letters and found an old photograph tucked inside, a picture of herself holding a baby, beside which was written the child's name. Sarah. It hit her like a blow. The young woman standing before her was the daughter she had given birth to years ago. Memories surged up. She felt stunned and confused, and a sharp, uncontrollable ache in her chest. To confirm the truth, she contacted a lawyer she had once trusted, hoping to use legal means to trace Ryan's actions after the accident. The lawyer pulled bank statements and property documents from before and after the crash. Soon, Ellie found irregularities. Within days of her accident, Ryan had rapidly handled her inheritance. The large sum that had originally belonged to her had been transferred into Ryan's name through forged documents. The paperwork cited so-called alimony and medical expenses, but the actual amounts were negligible, nowhere near enough to support her recovery or living costs. Anger and alertness flared in Ellie's heart as she realized Ryan's true face. From the start, he had known she'd had a daughter, and he had kept the mementos and photos she'd left for the future. He exploited Ellie's accident, memory loss, and severe injuries to control the situation, drawing Sarah into it and using her desire to find her birth mother to construct a carefully designed scheme. The goal was simple: seize Ellie's inheritance and move the bulk of the assets into his own hands. Ellie cross-checked Sarah's birth records and the timing of Ryan's marriage. She discovered that the wedding date Ryan arranged closely coincided with her accident. He took advantage of the window when she was incapacitated to rush through the paperwork and asset transfers, even manufacturing the appearance to the outside world that Ellie was dead, so everyone would accept her absence as fact. Materials provided by the lawyer revealed more details. Ryan had contacted banks and investment firms repeatedly under the pretext of handling Ellie's estate, but in reality, he forged signatures and documents to shift funds into accounts he controlled. He even used purported medical and alimony expenses as excuses to give Ellie tiny sums, so she would believe she still had access to some of her assets. Ellie sat quietly reading these documents, stunned and in pain. She had once believed Ryan was someone she could rely on. The life she had imagined together turned out to be built on deceit and conspiracy. She now understood that Sarah's appearance was not an accident, but a deliberate part of Ryan's plan, using the mother's searching emotions of his child to make the fraud seem plausible and difficult to question. Ellie began to organize her thoughts. She connected Ryan's actions, Sarah's emergence, and the timing of the accident. Every thread pointed to the same conclusion: Ryan had been operating behind the scenes to monopolize her inheritance. He exploited her vulnerability from injury and memory loss, and even enlisted Sarah to lend the scheme credibility, making Sarah a tool or bargaining chip in his design. She started collecting more evidence, sorting letters, photographs, and documents, recording every irregularity. She asked her lawyer to further investigate the asset transfer records and to prepare to legally reclaim what was rightfully hers. She understood that this fight was not only for herself, but also for Sarah, to keep her daughter from being swept further into deception. As she pieced the events together, Ellie's picture of Ryan grew clearer. He had plotted from the beginning, using her injuries, memory loss, and the existence of her daughter to deceive and plunder her estate. Everything fit together with a single purpose: to control her fortune. While her health, her daughter, even her life, had been treated as means to that end, determination ignited in Ellie's heart. She would uncover every truth, protect herself and Sarah, and expose Ryan's plot. She now held crucial clues: the timing of Ryan's actions, his arranged marriage, the record of transferred assets, and Sarah's identity. all key evidence for unveiling the mystery and reclaiming her inheritance. While sorting through the materials, Ellie often looked at Sarah. The young woman's eyes were full of longing and unease, but Ellie knew Ryan had exploited the emotional bond between mother and child. She would need to proceed carefully, slowly reveal Ryan's true nature, and at the same time make Sarah understand the truth. At this point in the story, Ellie had gathered all the clues, identified Ryan's conspiracy, and confirmed that Sarah was her daughter. Yet the final outcome remained unresolved. She still had to, in the actions that followed, unravel every remaining mystery and fight to take back the life and assets that were rightfully hers. Ellie decided to try reaching out to Sarah. She understood that at first, her daughter might doubt her, even meet her with hostility, since Ryan had already planted false impressions deep in her heart. Ellie carefully arranged a meeting in a public place, hoping to avoid Ryan's notice while also protecting Sarah. At their first encounter, Sarah looked at Ellie with guarded, suspicious eyes. "Who are you? Why are you looking for me?" Ellie kept her composure and offered a small smile. "I know this sounds sudden, but there are things you deserve to know. My name is Ellie, and I want to tell you something only you and I could possibly share." Sarah froze, her brow furrowing. "Something only we could share? Are you trying to trick me?" Ellie nodded gently and pulled an old photograph from her bag, a picture of herself holding a baby. The baby was Sarah, with her name written beside it in Ellie's handwriting. "This was taken a long time ago. The baby in my arms is you. Maybe you don't remember from when you were little, but this is the truth." Sarah stared at the photo, her expression flickering. For a moment she wavered, but then her brow tightened again. "You're lying." "I only trust Ryan. He told me you were already gone." Ellie didn't rush to argue. Instead, she patiently shared the past. When she was young, she had given birth to Sarah, but being too young to raise her, she had entrusted her to someone else. She carefully revealed details. Sarah's birth date, a small bracelet she wore as a child, a handmade toy Ellie once crafted for her. These were details only a mother could know. As Sarah listened, her expression began to shift. Her breathing quickened, her brows gradually eased, and doubt crept into her eyes. Memories stirred, faint fragments of a mother's voice, the warmth of an embrace, and the small toy she once received as a child. Ellie noticed her hesitation and kept her tone calm and warm. "Sarah, I know you were misled. Maybe you don't remember me now, but you can take your time to confirm. No one could fabricate these details." A few days later, Ellie arranged a more formal meeting. This time she brought more evidence, the official papers from when Sarah had been given away, excerpts from her old diary, and additional photographs. Sarah examined everything closely, and little by little she confirmed the truth of their bond. Her eyes shifted from suspicion to guilt and shock. "So, you really are my mother." Ellie reached out and took her hand, her voice soft. "Yes, I'm your mother. I never forgot you, and I never gave up on finding you." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. Ryan deceived me. I always thought you were gone. Everything he said was a lie." Ellie nodded. "I know, but now you see, he's been using you, and he's been using me. We need to uncover what he's done." With their relationship confirmed, Sarah began to share what she knew. She recalled Ryan's odd behavior, documents, bank statements, so-called medical expenses, and how he insisted her mother was dead. Slowly she realized she had been manipulated, every step orchestrated by Ryan. Ellie and Sarah sat together, piecing the evidence and scattered memories. Sarah's insider perspective gave Ellie the missing parts of the puzzle. Ryan had used the aftermath of Ellie's accident to transfer her inheritance into his name, disguising it as alimony and medical expenses, while convincing Sarah her mother was no longer alive. The two realized that to expose Ryan's scheme, they had to work together. Ellie held the legal documents and financial records. Sarah provided inside details and proof of Ryan's behavior. Together, they started drafting a plan, documenting every irregularity, every file, every conversation, to reveal the truth at the right moment. Sarah's eyes burned with both anger and guilt. "I was deceived. I never meant to hurt you. Now, I want to help you, to make things right." Ellie squeezed her hand firmly. "We're in this together now. As mother and daughter, we'll expose Ryan's lies and take back what belongs to us." A bond of cooperation began to grow. Sarah acted as the insider, offering key evidence of Ryan's crimes, forged documents, asset transfers, and his public false statements. Ellie organized, verified, and worked with lawyers and institutions to prepare the case. Their alliance steadily solidified. Ellie guided Sarah in how to watch Ryan carefully and gather information while protecting her from being manipulated again. Sarah, once suspicious and hostile, now leaned fully into the partnership, sharing every detail and timeline she could recall. Together, mother and daughter started unraveling Ryan's carefully constructed deception. Sarah's involvement gave Ellie access to information she never could have reached alone, strengthening both their legal and strategic position. A clear plan formed: expose Ryan's scheme, reclaim their rightful inheritance, and rebuild their bond. For the first time in years, Ellie felt a profound sense of steadiness and comfort. Though she had been betrayed and deceived, she now had her daughter's trust and support, and had finally regained her role as a mother. That bond of trust and unity lit the path ahead, giving her hope and laying the foundation for the battle still to come. Sarah recalled that Ryan had once let her access certain accounts and transaction files, hinting that these documents were important for protecting the family's assets. Through her lawyer, Ellie obtained the bank statements and discovered that a large amount of money had been transferred into accounts under Ryan's control right after her car accident. The sums were enormous, and the timing of the transfers almost perfectly matched the period just before and after the crash. Next, they gathered communication records. Sarah provided emails and chat logs between Ryan and various banks, law firms, and even some friends. These records revealed that Ryan had used forged signatures and falsified documents to move assets. He repeatedly instructed Sarah to cooperate with the paperwork and, when necessary, to conceal key facts so that outsiders would believe Ellie was already dead. Ellie and Sarah also reached out to staff members and friends who were in the know, obtaining witness statements. Some confirmed that Ryan had spoken, weeks before the crash, about how to quickly seize control of Ellie's assets. Others mentioned that he showed no concern for Ellie's health and was unusually indifferent after the accident. When combined, the testimony and documents formed a complete chain of evidence. During the evidence-gathering process, Ellie noticed certain suspicious details that suggested Ryan might have deliberately arranged the accident. For example, traffic camera footage showed another vehicle driving an abnormal route at the time of the crash. Moreover, Ryan had hinted several times beforehand about arranging some traffic incidents that wouldn't harm her safety. While this still required further confirmation, it was already enough to justify a formal legal investigation. Once the evidence was collected, Ellie and Sarah organized the materials and handed them over to their lawyer. The lawyer advised them to take legal action, exposing Ryan's crimes publicly, filing a lawsuit to recover the diverted assets, and pursuing his criminal liability. Together, Ellie and Sarah worked with the lawyer to prepare detailed statements, evidence lists, and witness rosters, making sure every piece of evidence could stand in court. In court, Ellie calmly laid out the facts. Ryan had taken advantage of her injuries, memory loss, and her daughter's situation to forge documents, transfer assets, and even manipulate Sarah into becoming part of the scheme. The lawyer presented bank records, communication evidence, and witness testimony, systematically revealing Ryan's actions. As the key witness, Sarah explained in detail how she had been unaware at the time and how Ryan had directed her to help with paperwork, providing inside proof of his misconduct. Ryan tried to defend himself in court, but faced with such a complete chain of evidence, his arguments quickly fell apart. He attempted to justify his actions under the pretext of asset, management, and alimony, but the bank records and testimonies clearly showed that these so-called arrangements were entirely his personal schemes, carried out without Ellie's knowledge. The court ultimately ruled that Ryan's actions constituted asset fraud, document forgery, and exploitation of trust for financial gain. The judge sentenced Ryan to return all illegally transferred assets and held him criminally liable, with a prison term ahead. Ellie finally obtained justice through the law. She reclaimed her inheritance and confirmed Sarah's true identity. The bond between mother and daughter slowly began to heal. After the case ended, Ellie and Sarah sat together, reflecting on what they had gone through. Looking at her daughter, Ellie felt both anger and a sense of relief. She realized that although Ryan's deception had caused immense harm, the trust and teamwork between mother and daughter had not only exposed the conspiracy, but also helped them rebuild their lives together. The two began planning their future. Ellie reorganized her affairs and assets to ensure her daughter would no longer be manipulated by outsiders. Sarah also clarified her role within the family and her responsibility to face challenges together with her mother. While the scars of the past could never be fully erased, they had learned to rely on one another, forming a strong and stable alliance. With the support of law and fact, Ryan lost both his wealth and his freedom. His manipulations and conspiracies completely collapsed. Ellie and Sarah gradually rebuilt their lives, fully aware that many challenges still lay ahead. But the trust and unity between mother and daughter had become their strongest safeguard. After everything they had been through, Ellie and Sarah slowly began to repair the 17 years of distance between them. The car accident, the betrayal, the inheritance disputes, these painful events that once tore them apart now became the chance to rebuild their bond. Ellie understood that restoring the mother-daughter relationship would take time, honesty, and patience. They started with the simplest daily conversations. Ellie shared stories from her youth, including the reasons she had given Sarah up and the struggles she faced during her teenage years. Sarah, in turn, opened up about the life she had lived under Ryan's shadow, as well as the longing and questions she had carried about her mother. Each conversation was tinged with emotion, yet it brought them closer to understanding each other's inner worlds. While sorting through old photos and letters together, Ellie and Sarah unintentionally relived many past memories. In one photo, little Sarah nestled in Ellie's arms, smiling innocently. In a letter, young Ellie had written heartfelt words to her future daughter. As Sarah looked at these keepsakes, tears streamed down her face. She realized that her mother had been silently protecting her all along, even when she couldn't be there in person. For Ellie, these memories deepened her understanding of her daughter's growth and struggles. She began making a conscious effort to communicate with Sarah on equal terms, showing respect rather than imposing authority as the mother. She invited Sarah to participate in family decisions and future plans. Together, they discussed where to live, educational arrangements, and their individual career goals. Every discussion strengthened the trust between them. As their relationship grew more stable, Ellie also started thinking about how best to use the inheritance she had reclaimed. She knew this wealth shouldn't just be for personal enjoyment, it needed to serve a greater purpose. After careful consideration, Ellie decided to establish a charitable foundation to help people who, like her, had faced life's upheavals, broken families, or betrayal. She consulted professionals and created an operational plan to ensure the funds would truly help others rebuild their lives. At the same time, Ellie rediscovered her own life's purpose. She had once loved art, but her passion had been forced aside during the turmoil of family struggles and legal battles. Now she finally had the chance to pursue her dreams again. She signed up for art workshops, began creating, and even combined art with philanthropy, using her work to raise funds for the foundation's projects. Her life gradually became fulfilling and meaningful, no longer bound by past pain. Inspired by her mother, Sarah also found a new direction. She took part in the daily operations of the foundation, coordinating projects and managing resources. Through their joint efforts, Sarah discovered her own value and responsibility. She slowly emerged from the shadow of Ryan's manipulation, gaining confidence in both work and life. The two supported each other professionally and cared for each other personally, and the trust between them was truly restored. In their daily lives, honesty and cooperation became their guiding principles. Ellie realized that the misunderstandings and separation of the past only made them treasure the present even more. Sarah, meanwhile, drew strength and security from her mother's warmth and steadfastness. Gradually, Ellie found peace within herself. She was no longer haunted by Ryan's betrayal, nor did she fear that past wounds would ruin her present. She had family, her daughter's companionship, and regained control of her life and her wealth. Most importantly, she had rediscovered her self-worth and life goals, and her heart was filled with strength. At one of the foundation's events, Ellie and Sarah stood side by side, watching the smiles of those they had helped. They both knew that what they had gained was not just the return of wealth, but the beginning of a new life. Hand in hand, they walked into the sunlight, talking about future plans and dreams. Their faces relaxed, yet resolute. The pain of the past was fading, replaced by warmth, hope, and strength. The life and work they planned together gradually took shape. Family, wealth, and inner peace began to flow naturally into their daily routines. Ellie realized that this journey had forged a bond with her daughter stronger than ever before. They had learned to face difficulties head-on, to solve problems together, and to cherish every ordinary day. Their lives fell into rhythm. The foundation operated steadily. Ellie's art blossomed, and they no longer dwelled on the past. Instead, they focused on the present, their hearts filled with hope. The restoration of their relationship and the rebuilding of trust gave mother and daughter the chance, after the storm, to embrace a new life that was truly their own.